Veneer. Let's talk about it. So for those of you that don't know, veneer is basically a thin layer of wood that's over some sort of substrate. Most modern furniture is going to be over a substrate of some sort of particle board, but years ago they would do it over a substrate layer of actual wood. So a lot of times you'll find actual real wood underneath that laminate, and sometimes it's actually pretty nice wood. Sometimes if you're actually taking the veneer off, you'll find a very nice wood under there that you can finish as well. But if you're into, the making over furniture and things like that, a lot of people tend to get discouraged, especially if you're new to doing it. They get discouraged by missing veneer, cracked veneer, and it's inevitable that that happens over time. A lot of old pieces will encounter moisture or something similar that starts to just pop the veneer off or crack it. And that damage can be discouraging for some people. But today I'm going to walk you through kind of a few tips and tricks on how you can repair or fix some of that veneer. Now, the methods I'm going to be going over today are more assuming that you're going to paint over it for the most part. There is ways to kind of repair veneer if you're going to be naturally refinishing it, but it's a lot more difficult and you're a lot more limited. They do sell, veneer by the roll that you could replace it. And there's also ways, people are very talented when they fill it in and they're going to stain over it. They'll use brushes and tools to actually make that filled in area look like the veneer and match it. That's a little beyond what I'm good at and what I can do. It takes a lot of talent to be able to do that. So today I'm going to walk you through a few ways that I use that are commonly used if you're going to be painting over, to kind of get that base nice. So with that, let's start going over some of those. So one of the methods you can use is to just simply use a wood filler and to fill in the spots. Now you want to make sure if you're going to use this method, you take a putty knife or some other tools and chip away at the loose material first. So this way you're getting a nice strong bond with your filler. So you want to get all that loose stuff away, all the crumbly stuff, and then you're going to go ahead and fill in. Now I like using the Bondo wood putty because it doesn't really have any shrinkage to it. It goes in real smooth. You could also use just a regular, Elmer's putty or something else. But one thing to keep in mind as well is if you're going to be painting over it, certain paints go better with certain fillers. So if you're using a milk paint, I would not recommend going with one of the regular wood fillers like Elmer and ones like that or DAP, because the milk paint will actually pull the color of the filler through. A lot of times the fillers start out purple, depending on what type you're using when it's not dry. And then when it dries, it'll dry a different color. But when you put milk paint over, a lot of times that purple will show through and it will stay that way. So you have a lot more trouble using something like a milk paint with those fillers. But if you use the Bondo, it is safe to go over with a milk paint and most other paints that we've ever tried. So that's one of the reasons why I like using the Bondo as well. So you're just gonna go ahead and apply your wood filler, sand it down, give it a nice sanding, get it nice and smooth, and then you can apply your paint over it. In certain cases, if you prefer, you can certainly prime over first, and that's gonna depend on your overall piece as well. If it's going to be prone to bleeding through, you're going to want to prime anyway, but we find in most cases you usually don't have to. So method number 2, this is more of a cover up aspect, and it works better when it's at the bottom. So a lot of times on these older pieces, the damage will be more towards the bottom. Obviously you're going to have some at the tops depending on how it was beat and how it was stored and things like that. But a lot of times if it was stored somewhere with moisture, the moisture will work up from the bottom and it'll start popping the veneer off, usually on the sides, and sometimes in the front. So this method is to basically cover up that bottom damage with a little strip of wood. Use something very thin, something probably an 1/8 inch or less if you can. So basically what you're going to do is cut that down into a smaller, thinner piece, maybe 2 or 3 inches, whatever looks good with the rest of your piece. And you're gonna cut that down and you're gonna fit that in between your front corner and your back corner. So there's usually some space in there that's kind of differentiated, and you can kind of see how it fits in there. So you can take that, just glue it, put some glue on, tack it fast with a couple nails, and you're ready to paint. Let it dry, and you can just paint over everything and it'll look like it was meant to be there. Now again, this is only going to work if it's more towards the bottom, and it's only that bottom damage, because the more it works up through the piece, the more it's going to be out of that area, and you won't be able to do that. So method number 3 is basically to take the veneer off. Now again, this is only gonna work for the older pieces that are over a wood substrate. If you have something newer, it's a lot harder to work with, because obviously you don't want to sand down past that veneer, because you're going to hit particle board, and that's going to be really noticeable, and you'll end up filling it in anyway. But if you have an older piece that's over a harder wood, you can go ahead and scrape that off. Now you can use multiple methods. Some people use a combination of like water and damp cloths, things like that. I prefer to use a heat gun, and basically just use a putty knife and just keep working under it. So you're going to keep moving the heat gun over, loosening up that glue, and then just keep popping it up with the putty knife, and then eventually you're going to get most of it off. And then you can go back with a sander. I go back over with my orbital sander and sand that nice and smooth if it's a nice wood underneath, and then a lot of times you can just keep that wood and just finish that off. So that's basically it. A few short, quick tips that hopefully will help you, and hopefully if you've shied away from some pieces in the past that had veneer damage, hopefully if you see them, you can look at them in a new light, and have a few ideas of how you can actually work with that piece. Because a lot of times, especially if you're flipping for profit, people don't want to deal with the veneer, they don't know how to deal with the veneer, and you'll be able to pick them up for a few bucks. At least that's been our experience. So don't shy away from it. It's just a few quick tips that we use. Obviously there's others, there's a lot of other ideas that people use to fix veneer or to repair it. These are just a few things that I've found helpful in our business, and hopefully you guys found it useful as well. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below.